a very warm welcome to everyone. I am Shrija Agrawal, and you are watching a dispatch in the future of a very special and very interesting one too. We decode the future of metaverse. The word metaverse has been used by everyone, more predominantly for the last couple of years. It's basically an overarching term that describes what is the next big phase of the internet and what advances a range of new technologies has taken, including virtual reality and augmented reality. With so much happening around this topic, the goal really is to transform the online world, which we are already a part of, and make it more immersive, allow individuals to have a 3D experience with it, and thus blur the line of what's physical and what's digital. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic has meant that individuals interact digitally now more than ever. In October 2021, Mark Zuckerberg rebranded Facebook as Meta and positioned it as a metaverse company, stating it's an internet to be inside of rather than just looking at it, that it is a place where people or the avatars would be able to get together with family and friends, work, learn, play, shop, and create. At its core, the metaverse is a grand vision of what the future may look like, encompassing new technology that would take decades to come to fruition. People who own NFTs or some form of cryptocurrency are already experiencing the metaverse. Video games have been popular for a long time, and gameplay has made digital worlds engaging, enticing players to come back for more. Individuals who have dabbled with AR and VR are at the minimum metaverse adjacent. And those that have used digital avatar to attend parties or meetings, they are in the neighborhood of this phenomenon called metaversality. That being said, a metaverse that's truly immersive metaverse is in need of fintech solutions. Expounding on the potential of the metaverse are really the futurists, founders, investors, and executives. They're all trying to stake their claim, believing here is the entertainment, experimentation, social connection, and most important of them all, profit can go to the next level. The question is, where does it go from here? With this new phase of interconnected virtual experiences and technology, what really are the key innovators and futurists going to capitalize on to bring in the next wave of innovation? To break it all down, please help me welcome Kanishk Gaur, founder, India Future Foundation, Abhinav Varma, founder and CEO, Ikonz, and of course, Nitin Sharma, partner in India co-head Antler. Nitin, I would like to sort of begin with you from a very investor perspective and someone who really has been at the heart of creator economy and cryptocurrency. And the last time when we had you on a panel discussion, we had this very detailed conversation around cryptocurrency and can it really be labeled as the future of money? Let me begin by asking you that this entire conversation about metaverse, how much of it Facebook manufactured and how much is different from the internet that we are living in right now? This discussion, for instance, that we are happening on StreamYard or Zoom, isn't this metaverse already? And why do we need a metaverse, so to speak?
Hi, Shrija. Good to be here. It's a good question. I think, like you pointed out, the term itself is still very ambiguous and nebulous in a way. I would say that, at one level, people have been expanding the way we've been living in the last couple of years has become so virtual. And there's been a massive rise in things like gaming and NFTs. And so people are sort of extrapolating that to say the metaverse is here and, we are in the metaverse and people are obviously hyping this a lot too. I think in a true sense, I don't think that that's the metaverse. I think to me, the metaverse of course, it's a very abstract thing, but it needs to have sort of three conditions. One is sort of, the digital representation of people who are in an environment, so that, with things like gaming, digital avatars, etc. That's already accomplished in a way. Gaming is a $200 billion industry, and most of that revenue is actually things that people do inside of games now, right? It's not buying the games, but in-game purchases, for example. But the second and third aspects really have to do with what I would describe as an immersive environment, right? And that's a spectrum. So we are a little bit immersed in this StreamYard discussion we are having, but in a true sense, the true immersion is when we are actually going inside things like AR and VR. And I think unless you sort of have that in a true sense, that's not really reaching the edge of what I would call metaverse. But that's also coming, and I think that's the important thing to realize. Oculus Quest is a $300 device, and just like there was a Moore's law with computer chips, there's a Wright's law with VR. And so I think in the next 5 to 10 years, each of us will have VR devices. We will be spending maybe fourth or third of our days, if not more, inside these environments. So this is not here yet, but it is not far away, is how I would describe. And the third aspect of metaverse, I believe, outside of sort of digital presence and immersion, the third thing I would say is, you're actually part of a virtual economy as well. So you're doing things, owning assets, whether it's gaming, whether it's advertising, commerce, education, travel, art, all of these things. You're actually also participating in that, and being part of that virtual economy, right? So interestingly, some parts of that are already here. NFTs, for example, where everybody's been talking about, and I think with a lot of things that are being built on top of NFTs, in parallel, that virtual economy world is also getting ready. So all these things will converge in the next, let's say, 5 to 7 years, and I think the metaverse, as I understand it, will actually become a reality, right? So we're just getting sort of, it's an appetizer right now. We're taking bites at it in a few different ways.
Thanks for that, Nitin. And I think you pretty well put that we are perhaps scratching the surface on where we are in the entire metaverse conversation. And you spoke about three important ingredients which basically form the part of the metaverse conversation right now. One is the digital persona, the digital presence, which becomes absolutely important. And you also spoke about an immersive experience. And third, the entire idea of having a virtual economy associated with it. So what one really understands that if internet were a separate country or a separate universe being built in, I think metaverse is the underlying pipeline on which we are building things out right now. So what really is the playbook for that new universe? How will the buildings look like? And how is underlying technology going to be looking like? Because whenever I speak with talk about metaverse, people tend to associate that largely with virtual reality and augmented reality. And perhaps somewhere in that conversation, the real potential of metaverse is being lost. Abhinav, I wonder what really is your viewpoint on this one, and then I get on to Kanishk.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Shrija. I think Nitin spelled it out really well about the different aspects of what forms a metaverse. I think I look at it as a way that we've been engaging with games over the many years. We have digital personas already put in place. So the way we represent ourselves, we can get very creative in the way we represent ourselves in the metaverse. And right now, just extrapolating what the gaming world is with like the $200 billion thing that Nitin mentioned, and most of the $140 billion coming from skins and avatars. So I think the metaverse piece of representation is already happening. Now we'll have to extrapolate that into everything in the world, right? Like already, let's say a very different example of how real world commerce and the metaverse can mix is, let's say, like, even like buildings today, right? Like real estate and stuff, they have 3D models where people can go and see what's happening in there. So all of them is also some of the earliest forms of forming virtual worlds where people can experience it in a more immersive way, see what it looks inside, see how it is designed inside. So I think we're seeing already like bits and pieces of the metaverse develop. But I think the earliest adopters are going to be gamers and other people who have already experienced this over the past many years. And as I said before, like there's a lot of piping that needs to be still developed for the place where we need to be 5 to 7 years from now. AR, VR, as Nitin mentioned again. I think the adoption will only increase when the headsets are much cheaper and it's broadly adopted. I know the Google Cardboard is a very affordable form of hardware, but it's very basic. You don't really, you don't really see it being very immersive. So I feel the metaverse as it's also like 5 to 7 years away, but I think there's early adopters working in that space. And there's going to be a lot of mixing between the real world and the virtual world. Let's say fashion, right? Let's take an example of fashion. So H&M and the other brands are already, joining the metaverse in a way that people can go to their storefront. Samsung opened a storefront there right now. So people can experience it there, buy if they like it, buy it in the virtual world, but also have it shipped in the real world. So I think there's going to be a lot of cross integrations between these two worlds. I think it's the very beginning, as Nitin mentioned, it's just the tip of the iceberg of where we'll be in like 4 or 5 years from now.
Kanishk, I come to you, and it's an important question. I would perhaps also like to get Nitin's views on this. Is that You understand cryptocurrency. I mean, we had this large conversation around that, and so much of regulatory slugfest that seems to be under for a variety of reasons. And one can empathize with where innovators are coming, and one also needs to understand the viewpoint of regulators are coming from. The moot point is that why do we need the metaverse? Just because the world's largest technology company decides to rebrand itself as Meta. So all of us are now facing ourselves that, okay, this is the metaverse, this is the new $1 trillion economy that really has opened up. But why do we need the metaverse is the fundamental question. Don't we have enough on the land of internet already to be monetized, and we have a unicorn almost every week now?
So, Shrija, thank you for having me. I think the need for the metaverse is for the globalization to happen across. There is something called as digital culture, where people are part of organizations irrespective of their geography, their location, their culture, and they continue to work. And the metaverse is going to change the experience. So today, if I'm sitting in Silicon Valley or I'm sitting in India, I'm going to talk to my colleagues in a virtual room, and I'm going to have conversations with them and work as if we are working together in a conference room physically. That is what metaverse is going to provide. And for the true power of internet to be realized, I think metaverse must be the future, because e-commerce, my colleagues here have already spoken about gaming, but also having real estate on metaverse is going to be the future. Because today I see that companies are going to create their virtual training rooms or virtual offices, and they were going to tell their employees that get the headset and then talk to everyone. And if COVID continues, we keep on getting new forms of the virus and it keeps on mutating. The work from home is going to be here to stay. The hybrid working model is going to be here to stay. Then metaverse is going to change the way we do business, the way we do work. And it is going to allow people to be more hyper connected and deliver work. So for the working world to continue and for providing seamless experience, for allowing conversations to happen, I think metaverse is the way to go, and that's where we are heading towards. And it's not just Facebook. There are other companies as well, Microsoft, Google, everybody is making their investments. And I have seen companies who are trying to sell spaces, virtual spaces in metaverse, and allow people to say, okay, this is your virtual space in the metaverse, and your team can operate and they can still feel that they are working from the office. That's going to change. In terms of transactions, I think people don't just want to rely on physical money. They don't want a dollar to be the global transaction. They would want cryptocurrencies which could be freely operated and traded, and they can get the best of the experience across the globe. So cryptocurrencies is definitely a key component for the metaverse. And as my colleagues have pointed out, NFTs, that's the future, right? People are going to have their avatars and they would want fan following to buy their equipment, their experience, or even releasing movies, right? If Amitabh Bachchan is today having his own NFT, I am sure the other top celebrities in India are also going to follow up by creating their own NFTs and allowing people to get those NFTs, releasing their exclusive albums, videos, or movies on metaverse.
Nitin, I wanted to bring you in. Kanishk began his entire argument by saying that we need the metaverse because of globalization and to have more interconnected workspaces. But the reality is that if there's anything that COVID has done, it has essentially killed globalization. We are actually in the world of globalization. The word globalization has been a passe. The economists showed a scathing piece on this. And the animosity between countries has really been brought to the fore. Their geopolitical relations. It is not easy to be a global technology company anymore. All of us are becoming more and more inward looking rather than outward looking. And that's the reality we can't forget. That is number one. And second is that I understand that COVID accelerated the digital adoption. So people can be connected in a virtual environment. And that's an argument which is well taken. But why do you need the metaverse or the immersive experience? Is that something just fabricated and created, say, by the recent technology companies to create another economy or an asset class to play with? What is your sense?
No, it's a very good philosophical question. I think there are two answers, right? One is, do we need the metaverse because it's very beneficial for society in some ways? And I will come to your globalization point in a bit. But you need the metaverse because of the benefits. So yes, I think Kanishk covered some. People make the point it's about opportunity, right? If you really want to democratize, then physical location should not be a constraint for like. So today, people can educate themselves online and they can seek information online, John. But what if you could take it to the next level, where any kid in any part of India, let's say, could actually be immersed in an environment anywhere else, right? So people make the argument that it will expand opportunity. People make the argument that it will be good for even things like climate change. You cut down travel, you cut down a lot of offices could be truly global, etc. I think those are fair points, but I actually don't think that we need the metaverse as much as we cannot avoid the metaverse. So I actually don't think that it's something that even with Facebook, etc. I don't think that they are creating it as much as they're anticipating it, and they just want to stay ahead of it and help shape it and not get wiped out. Because if Web 2 moves to Web 3, Facebook, the largest company created on top of Web 2, will have an existential problem. And so that's a more of a sort of, a smart move by them to stay ahead of the curve. Now, when I say it is more about we cannot avoid the metaverse, that's what I believe more strongly, because it's being shaped by Gen Zs and alphas who are still in sort of schooling, right? So actually, to me, it's just a generational change. These consumers have had some of us have had an analog childhood, or even sometimes adulthood, but these two new generations have had no analog. They've been digital in every single interaction from very early in their life, and this is just a progression for them, right? The people also make the arguments that that the virtual metaverse will actually be a place where people feel happier than in the real world. So the people have made this argument. If you go to Ready Player One, etc., right? There's some interesting thinking that people will want to escape to a different reality, which is actually happier, perhaps, right? So I think that there is a lot happening, culturally, which is why it's more to me a progression that we cannot avoid, rather than we need it today or something. To the point about globalization, you're right about the fact that COVID has actually decelerated globalization, but it has only accelerated the global culture, right? So again, going back to the Gen Zs now, they are in the virtual sense, it has actually accelerated a lot, right? Because earlier we used to say that the girl in Bhopal is on Instagram and she's following the same things that a girl in New York is following. Now, in the last 3 or 4 years, this has gone 10x, where whether it's NFTs, whether it's gaming, there's just a new way that Gen Zs are relating to the world, and in that sense, globalization has actually accelerated, and I don't think that there's any slowing it down.
That is well put and candid, and I think it's an answer which is acceptable, that you can't really avoid it. But the question that do we need it is not a clear answer. I think none of us really know this. And companies like Facebook, they have to be ahead of the pack. It's an interesting argument on Web 2 and Web 3. A lot of chatter being built out, especially in the VC fraternity, about investing into Web 3.0 companies. And two questions. So what happens to Web 2.0 then? I mean, it is out of fashion. It is a passe now. And what happens to upskilling? Do we really have the talent pool to get to the world that we are envisaging, to get to the environment that we want to be? I mean, especially from India.
Transition from Web 2 to Web 3.0, right? I believe the internet, Web 3.0, right? It'll be decentralized. Like right now in Web 2.0, it's always been siloed, been very siloed. Like a lot of the power has been held by these really big companies, and they're also trying to make a transition and stay ahead of the pack. But to Nitin's point, I think it's inevitable, right? Like already people right now, we're seeing the early days of Gen Z actually, believing in digital assets more than physical assets, right? They would prefer like spending thousands of dollars on a virtual item compared to a physical item. So I think the generations will actually push more and more companies from Web 2 to Web 3.0. I think from an investor's point of view, I don't know what to comment, but I'm seeing a lot of interest in Web 3.0 companies building in this space. I think it's inevitable, right? I think I would define the metaverse as a place where, you put on your headset and you go to a certain place, and when you come back, you feel that you want to go back in there. Like, that is a point which is like much further ahead. But I think it's also like, if you can think about games, right, they're a form of escapism, right? Like when you're trying to relax, you're trying to go somewhere else from where you're not.
It's escapism. It is
Escapism, right? It is. So, you're trying to be somewhere else. Like movies, you could think about as escapism, right? They take you for those 2-3 hours in a certain reality for the characters that are built in there. You associate with them at some level. The same way, the metaverse will also be a place for a lot of different aspects where people can go to. Like, like I want to party there. Okay, I want to go to Ibiza, Spain today, like, and one party with some couple of people. For that, for me to happen today, I have to take a flight, coordinate with all my friends. Some of them will like ditch me, they won't come, so the plan will never materialize, right? But this way I can just fly there. So I think Web 3.0
Can
will
we say
basically...
that this is the internet being built for the Gen Z and the alphas? Can we say that? Or does it mean that the millennials and people above that suddenly become extremely irrelevant to this world? Or do they also have to immerse themselves and learn the language of this new internet which is being built?
I think we are, right? Like, as we speak, I think everyone is still working on, I think we don't know what it will look like. I'm not going to say we'll be irrelevant, but I think everyone has to keep up space. Like, I have a gut check, right? Like, whenever this conversation comes up, I have a gut check to just think about, will we ever be going back to bullock carts or like, past technologies, right? I think we'll be more immersed by technology. I think there'll be a lot of learning and a lot of education that needs to be done about what this will look like. And I think there's a lot of education that needs to be, and everyone has to keep up. And it's moving so fast, it's hard to keep up with this space right now. Yeah.
See, it's very good to be overawed with technology, but don't forget, there's tech lash very soon. The same young generation which got onto Facebook actually got Facebook down in a very short span of time. And it's very, very enticing to be overawed with technology and new platforms to come, especially those which have network effects. And Facebook and Google is really at the heart of it. They give you WhatsApp, they give you Instagram, they give you Facebook. It's a new economy network effect. But the same generation, the youth, people like us, the millennials, tech lash happens time to time. What is relevant today becomes so irrelevant 3 years from now. So having to be updated all the time and to put your bucks on that this new internet is being built for the Gen Z and the alpha and clearly declaring it as the future is not necessarily a very safe line to tread, is what I would say. Especially when there's so many untapped spaces already in India. Think about our economy in India, really. We're still talking about technology inclusion. We're talking about mobilization of blue collar workers. That is what we are. This is the reality where we are. And then there's another India which talks about metaverse, things to be in Spain. There's a huge disconnectedness that I see here, honestly.
Go for it.
Oh, sorry. No, I think that's fair. And look, I just draw comfort from the fact that we're talking about sort of 10, 15-year changes. And none of this is real tomorrow. I think those of us in the startup ecosystem, we see, obviously, by definition, we are a little bit or more on the edge. So, I don't think that this replaces other opportunities or other priorities necessarily. I think what we should look at is there are millions and tens of millions of new consumers in India, and it's like that they will leapfrog to a different internet experience. And I do think that it is still. So I think India as a country needs to be talking about both electrification of the last villages and metaverse. Right? We have to be sort of doing both because both are important. I think that if we are talking about a new virtual global economy with trillions of dollars of wealth creation, then Indians and Indian entrepreneurs should be part of that and should actually create a lot of wealth, right? So I think it is still relevant. While of course the points, it is very jarring. Of course, it's very jarring. And but I think that's just the nature of everything in the last couple of years. Like you look at the real world versus financial markets, or you look at all of these escapist experiences versus like the real problems people are having. You will find that contrast everywhere. So I think this is just it's one more instance of it. I think on the point you mentioned about Web3 talent from India, I mean that's what excites me the most. We
Wow.
we we also have announced something, to put almost 25% of our, almost a third of our corpus in India towards everything related to Web3 and including the extension to Metaverse. We've done our first investment. So I think the reason we are doing that, reason we are leaning in so much is because this is a once in a generation opportunity where we have, literally thousands, and like right now maybe 4 or 5 thousand developers in India are upskilling to Web3. It's a very minuscule number, but India has the chance to sort of shape the future of all of these things we talk about, Web3, Metaverse, because of the talent pool we have. And so this migration over the next 5 to 7 years is very important from a talent perspective, right? Because you don't want a sort of all that value creation to happen in Silicon Valley only, or elsewhere. Hopefully, we can actually shape some of these things from India.
So definitely, there needs to be upskilling and talent creation when we're talking about such a large economy, new internet economy, the new virtual world economy being built for the Gen Z. Abhinav, I would like to sort of get you in. Interesting conversation we were having about Supandi and your digital characters. So tell me a little more about NFTs and how does that economy really work? If you were to give me an example in simple layman terms with startups trying to get into the NFT space. So what really are NFTs? How does it really work? Is it like real money currency tokens? How does it work in the digital economy? Yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, digital asset ownership hasn't existed, right, for like many years. Like we've always owned physical assets in the past, and we had like, let's say for real estate, land deeds. Let's say you're buying some item, you have a receipt to ascribe ownership. But for digital assets, there was no certain way where you could ascribe ownership, which was basically, to you. So NFTs actually ascribe digital ownership because they're on the blockchain and they can't be tampered with. So basically, ownership of digital assets is possible because of NFTs. You're seeing the earliest forms, people owning digital art, like multiples of stuff that are happening in the NFT market right now. So think about it this way, right? Like for the new metaverse or the new internet to develop, there needs to be a way where you can basically ascribe ownership, just like how in the physical world, in the physical world you have all the deeds, all the receipts and stuff like that. So NFTs are that for the virtual world. So NFTs will basically be your access passes into a virtual world. It could be an avatar that you own as an NFT that will be a virtual access pass. So I think you should always think about NFTs as just owning, as ascribing digital asset ownership. And those are critical, right? That's the main business model for the metaverse. Like just like how we had all, it's not a currency as of sort. It's just like, think of it as an access token, as an NFT that can basically be clearly identified as you are the owner of it, and that can be easily interoperated between multiple places because they're based on the blockchain. And coming to the point of Supandi and like the characters, we are working with. We are trying to bring iconic IP from India to the world, like through storytelling, through unique storytelling. So Supandi, you mentioned before that you loved the character and how it could look like. So potentially you could be Supandi in the metaverse, right? Through an NFT ownership. So you will be a certain type of Supandi in the metaverse. You can look like Supandi. You can have different characteristics. So that's at the basic level of NFTs. So NFTs can be in different formats like music, art. It can be access. Think of every single movie ticket we have today. Anything that is unique and that can be ascribed is an NFT.
So Nitin, this is really the coming of the age of the creator economy. I mean, that really is at the heart of it. We are ascribing value and access to imagination and how wild that imagination can be. And what I'm understanding is that everything is built around decentralization because the so-called new generation does not believe in ascribing power to one central authority. So will there be any rule book? Will there be any playbook for this NFTs currency? Who decides the value of it? And there's always a constant slugfest in the cryptocurrency world that we're already seeing. So how will the playbook be decided of some of these new technologies?
So I think if I understand the question correctly, the idea is that everyone who's talking about the metaverse and Web3. So think of I in my mind the equation is that DAOs, NFTs, crypto assets, decentralized cloud. These are all building blocks for Web3, right? And then when you layer on top of Web3, AR, VR, etc., that's when you sort of get the metaverse, right? So the question is a tough one because there are so many building blocks, right? So this question of decentralization or centralization could be asked at each of those levels. I would say that the hardcore believers who are sort of creating these building blocks, whether it's NFTs, communities within NFTs, certain new projects that have raised, they want to follow the decentralization playbook, and that's sort of the parallel thread in that if we are doing everything with the idea of where Bitcoin started, then let's empower users, let's create community ownership of these assets, let's not have censorship, let's keep it open so any player from anywhere can join, etc., etc. And then you also have sort of, when you mentioned Meta, and of course Microsoft will play a big role in this, Amazon will play a big role.
Yeah.
There'll be massive efforts from the so-called Web2 centralized entities who will also play in this, right? And so what you're going to see, I think, is the short answer is there's no one playbook. I think there's going to be a big clash. And even within the decentralized infrastructure, there will be pieces which will be centralized. So, for example, there's a good debate going on right now where, as much as we say that people connect to MetaMask, which is a wallet, to any kind of a decentralized application, technically you're not connecting to the node on the blockchain. You are actually pinging something of an API, and that API is something like an Infura, which is a centralized layer, right? So I think this is going to be a very, very tough battle. Even within decentralized infrastructure stacks, there will be parts that will be centralized, and then these same decentralized stacks will compete against the large central players, right? So I don't think that it will be. I think decentralization is really hard to achieve, and I think it's very overhyped sometimes. And so I would find that at best, what we will have is a semi-decentralized metaverse for several years, and then I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know what it looks like in 15 years.
Nitin is being very, very sane today, and absolutely the sanity, and not giving like the yes or the no. He's giving that no, dude. There's a lot of hype. What is the reality? So he's seeing through that prism. It's cutting through the clutter and giving the clear answers, which is good for
I think
audience.
there are enough people doing the other stuff. So
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So I think it's good to sort of have had you on this conversation. Very interesting conversation, I must say, and there's so much to sort of take away from this. Kanishk, you have been silent for a while and sort of silently observing your fellow panelists making some very important remarks. Anything so far that you want to sort of contribute or add to? And perhaps I would then like to understand your viewpoint on some of the policy considerations around metaverse and how do you think would they evolve?
Yes, I think one important aspect which I wanted to point out was that as we move towards metaverse and move from Web 2.0 to 3.0, securing digital identity is going to be really important, right? Whether you are a Supandi in the metaverse, if your Supandi identity gets stolen and gets misused for bullying somebody or causing a financial fraud or creating more chaos by trolling people, it can create larger issues. And this is the reality that we are living in today, that as we move to newer technologies, the use of AI, ML, and botnets is increasing heavily. And the big tech is controlling the world, then the government's controlling the big tech. So that's another aspect that we are heading towards. So how do we govern all of this is going to play a very, very vital role. And we have seen that EU, Australia has started taking some of these actions by charging some of the big tech for the content which they are taking from other platforms, and also allowing smaller publishers to exist. because what's happening is that all your offline businesses today are moving to online, and they are getting powered by the big tech. So you would buy your insurance from a traditional insurance company like a LIC, but sooner you will be buying insurance from Google, and Google might be creating a marketplace in partnership with a large telco where all your services will be provided on a digital world. So the movement of offline services to online, using Web 3.0 and creating new marketplaces is creating a parallel economy where we are heading towards. And of course, the VC community is investing on those. But how do we regulate them? Specifically, aspects like cryptocurrencies, or even or even allowing blockchain to be used. We have seen that blockchain can have great futures, specifically around allowing lending. NBFCs is the future. But how do we create those is going to be a key aspect as technology moves ahead.
Thanks for that. I think we're going to last round your questioning, and I will not get into cryptocurrency regulation because that's a different conversation, which I think cannot even be finished in 2 or 3 hours. I mean, and I'm sure there's a cryptocurrency bill also to be tabled soon, and we'll see what is the FM's view on that. Interesting. We also have we have a VC, we have an entrepreneur, and we have somebody from the foundation perspective. Nitin, good to understand from you and the way you sort of laid out the entire metaverse economy and the various sort of components to it. I would like to understand from you that where exactly is India in the value chain, and when you look at opportunities coming your way, where are you seeing the maximum sort of innovation going forward? 2 or 3 key areas where you see that a lot of activity happening and we are there.
Yeah, so I think it's a good time to just take a step back and see how early we are. So there are about 100,000, 1 lakh wallets right now in the metaverse worlds. That's it. And there have been a total of about 200 or 300 million or so of sales of assets or items in these metaverse environments, right? So in the entire world, sort of 1 lakh wallets related to the metaverse environments, the immersive ones that we've been talking about. There are 5 lakh 500,000 who've been around NFTs, right? That's still a small number. There have been about 2 million people who are in gaming in the blockchain. And there are about 200 million people now in crypto in general. And there are 3 billion people on Facebook. So we're talking about sort of very, very early, right? So, and the reason I'm painting that picture is because it means that the opportunity is endless, and there is really no no structural disadvantage that anybody has if they're starting out in India, because they're building for a global market from day one, which is a huge difference in the world of Web3 or Metaverse, right? Is you can build globally from day one. You're not restricted to anything within India. The most opportunities, clearly, I think as has been mentioned by Abhinav as well, I think it's largely around NFTs. I think right now there is, India hasn't even caught on the whole blockchain gaming, the whole trend. So Axie Infinity is a game that's played by about 2 million gamers, largely in Southeast Asia. 25% of them don't even have a bank account. This is the first time, and they're actually, earning money by playing these games. This also goes into a huge question about how the government will look at it, right? But I think at one level, blockchain-based gaming itself India is a massive gaming market now, Fortnite, PUBG, etc. But the transition to sort of blockchain-based gaming hasn't happened. So that's one area where I think we're certainly seeing a lot of people talk about NFTs in general, whether it's for art, entertainment, music, movies. That's another area we've seen a lot of activity. But and I will keep aside sort of everything happening in DeFi and other parts of crypto, because that's been going on for a while, and stick to sort of what is more relevant to the metaverse. I think that honestly, whether it's about better content development, better 3D environments, better gaming experiences, I think these are all areas in which a lot of innovation can come out of India. And apart from that, I would say last thing is that there is a lot of plumbing from a pure tech perspective that needs to happen, right? Interoperability of metaverses. So when you have an asset across different metaverses, how will you transact? And these are questions which have to do with just better middleware, APIs, etc. And so those are also areas I think where Indian developers can play a big role.
That's sort of very well summarized. I come to you now, Abhinav. The same question for you. What really are the opportunity sets that you see? And from an entrepreneur perspective, I would want to understand from you. Everybody's talking about the opportunity. What about the key challenges that you are facing while building out an organization like this?
Sure. I think coming to the market landscape itself, like how Nitin pointed out, there's like 500,000 people who have bought NFTs or actively having wallets, right? India being, such a massive population and having about 450 million gamers, I think there's still a lot of education that we are focused on. I think a lot of people still don't understand. I mean, yes, globally in the West, they are understanding it like in pockets here and there. But for us, the way we are working in this ecosystem with characters, with IP characters that Indian people can relate to globally, I feel that education is a big piece of it. What NFTs are, what it could look like, and there could be potential ways for you, just like how Nitin mentioned, Axie Infinity. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that it's brought a lot of people out of poverty in Philippines once they lost their jobs, right? A lot of these developing economies, like as you mentioned, didn't have bank accounts, but they were actually earning money. So this would be a very big opportunity, and like play to earn gaming, I feel is going to be a very big space coming out of here and globally as well. There's only a few big players that are in this space, and India hasn't really seen something. So we are building something in that space with iconic IP. Coming to the point of the earlier part of the discussion, right? I feel that Web3 talent itself is limited today. I think Web3 talent, having great talent, having great 3D Unity developers for all these blockchain games, a lot more upskilling needs to be there, because there's a lot of projects, but I think there needs to be skilled labor here for like companies such as ours to rapidly build out such environments and scale it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I was also sort of getting on the point of upskilling. Kanishk, any sort of last thoughts on
Yes.
this conversation?
So I think so we have seen that NFTs been having a great future, at least in Southeast Asia, and we have seen that Philippines market. It's a top thing, right? People are just sitting at home and subscribing to gaming platforms, getting NFTs, and that's creating another wave where people can have another line of employment. That's something new. What we've seen in India is a lot of global captives are set up. Earlier, India was a destination for offshoring, but today India is a developed economy, moving towards a developed niche skill set around Web 3.0. And a lot of global companies today are setting up their digital hubs where development is happening on Web 3.0 technologies. And it is also, we've seen, destinations like Hyderabad, Trivandrum, specifically, and even in Mumbai, companies like Google, Amazon, other US companies who are investing in Web 3.0, setting up their digital hubs. So as far as skilling is concerned, yes, there is definitely a requirement. And if we look at the edtech industry, it's taking us to that channel, because you don't require to take formal courses. It's through edtech that you can do a lot of learning on emerging tech development, right? So specifically, if you want to code, create architecture, work on Web 3.0 technologies, you have enough opportunities. The other thing which is going to play a very important role is that there will be a lot of jobs where you're not going to be full-time employed for a company, but you will be like a freelancer, and you will be working globally, developing niche technologies. And we have seen, so today, if I have to hire a developer for a blockchain, I'm not going to be dependent on hiring from India. I'm going to be dependent on hiring on what skill that person is bringing. And that person can even be based out of Brazil. And I've seen that specifically when you're hiring for gaming industry, you'll get best of those UX designers, not from India, but from somewhere in South America. And they would have tremendous amount of gigs to show you. So those are going to be really important aspect. And that's why I spoke about digital culture. Your location will not decide the future, but it is the skill that you're building will actually enable things for the future.
I think the consensus really can be that technology is eating the world, and all of us need to now learn coding. I mean, if you don't know technology, you clearly are irrelevant in this world. Is the big takeaway that I get. And for some of us who actually left science to pursue literature, this is really coming into its own. That it's proving to be so catastrophic. Seriously. Last question before I wrap this amazing conversation. And I got to ask that what would be the voice of caution, perhaps from an investor perspective, Nitin, to those getting into Web3, for those entrepreneurs who are thinking of starting out and thinking that, no, if I have to do something, it better be only Web3, but that really is the future, and perhaps would be burning their fingers, getting too soon into a space they don't necessarily understand too well.
Well, first of all, I don't want to be as alarmist or as worried as you were. So I think there are plenty of ways for millennials to reinvent ourselves. On the, I think I would say the same thing that I would say to any entrepreneur, regardless of space. Do it for the right reasons. I think right now the world is in a place where there's been too much time and too much money. Because of the confluence of COVID and everything that's happened in various asset classes. There's just a lot of inflation. It's easy to raise money. It's hard to build stuff. This is not, there'll be people who get lucky, but if you're building with a 5-7 view, there will be some real troughs of sort of disappointment and disillusionment, because it's very likely that in the next 2 or 3 years we have maybe not a crash, but a correction of sorts. And, it will go through its ebbs and flows. And you've got to have like that 7-10 year mindset and build it for the right reasons. And the second thing I would say is to build with a global mindset, which, as I pointed out earlier, I think more and more in some of these new spaces, it's not good enough to say I'm one of the best teams in India or I'm one of the best developers in India. You're competing on a global scale, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually your opportunity is now 10, 100 times bigger. Right? We are not restricted by India being a developing or developed country. We really have, for the first time in history, the ability to just use your technical talent and build and your skills to manage a community to build real interesting value very quickly. But you have to have a very sort of global mindset to do that.
Wow. A lot of key takeaways for entrepreneurs, really building for the global world. And are you really set to take on that kind of competition and that kind of challenge? It's a question one needs to really ask himself or herself. Time for some quick questioning here, like one word answers or one sentence answers at the best. And I would start with you, Abhinav. If you were to name one metaverse company which you admire the most, and you can't mention yours or something which Rajamouli Studios has done. You can't mention that. So if you mention a metaverse which you admire, what would that really be?
I think I really like Sandbox today, how it's developing and what it's doing, the team as a whole. So yeah, I like Sandbox a lot, where it's going. We take them as an inspiration from a point of view of a metaverse. When it comes to an NFT type of company, we look at Artifact Studios out of LA. So these are the two big inspirations for us while we look at the metaverse and the NFT space. Yeah.
Okay. Kanishk, what would be your key advice to the investor fraternity getting into metaverse? One word of caution. What would that be?
So, an aspect which has to be there is that the opportunity has to be a real one, a sustainable, and should not be like a gig which is there today and suddenly it disappears. So, looking at investments which will translate into returns or turning unicorns, I think that's the most difficult part. So finding those unicorns in metaverse is going to be the key. The technology can come out of anywhere. It's actually the talent who builds it. It's the team. So just watch out for that.
Okay, now let's put Nitin on the hot spot here. Nitin, really, I wanted to ask you, do you have an anti-portfolio in Metaverse yet?
I think that if you broaden that no. So the answer is no, because the Metaverse hasn't happened yet in the sense we talked about. But honestly, Polygon, I think that's a company, that's a project out of India with such a massive mind share in the world of Web3 now. And I blew it.
Okay. One key sort of learning that you've had during the entire COVID-19, which is still sort of, we're still reeling under it. And what really have been key 2 or 3 investing lessons that you have learned, which has come your way in a hard way?
Fundamentals don't matter anymore. In a world where you're money, too much time, anything can happen. And try not to be too analytical about, so same thing. I'm saying the same thing in two different ways.
Wow. Okay. And if you were to name one metaverse company which you admire a lot, what would that really be?
Just for me?
Yeah.
I think Sandbox is going to be very interesting. I would say that even the role that sort of NFT marketplaces will play. So a company like OpenSea is, one just crushing it right now. But it seems to have some of that, some of the DNA of like a company that will last for a while. So while it's not a pure metaverse company, it's a centralized entity. I think it's just mind blowing what they're achieving.
I think a lot of interesting names came on this conversation: Sandbox, OpenSea, Infinity, and let's see if we can create some of those coming out of India. As someone who has covered the private markets for a long time, I must tell you this, that there was an e-commerce wave, there was a fintech wave, the SaaS market wave, but the kind of interest and enthusiasm that one is seeing around metaverse, it really seems that COVID-19 has changed digital capitalism forever. I have never seen this benign kind of environment and this deal making happening at this speed. It's almost scary. But with that as a thought, let's see where we are in the future. Perhaps deal making from the VCs would also happen in metaverse, where startups are pitching in the metaverse and deals are being actually closed with NFTs. But we can only hope for that. Till time I see you next, goodbye and good luck and take care of yourselves. Thank you. Bye-bye.